Welcome back. So while things are looking at least a little more promising than they did a few days ago, there's still no guarantees that we're going to avoid the debt limit default. And joining us now to explain why defaulting on the debt limit is not a good thing, would not improve the economy, as some will tell you, is Christian Dorsey, Director of External and Governmental Affairs at the Economic Policy Institute. Christian, I appreciate a few minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Thanks for having me.
So do me and our audience a favor here. I'm going to read just some quotes here from some folks who believe that this is much ado about nothing here, going over the debt limit. And you do a little rhetoric versus reality for me, okay? And I'm going to start off with the first argument, which comes from Congressman Yoho. I'll editorially say, I think, appropriately named, saying that not only is this not a big deal, in some ways it might help. His exact quote was, "Not raising the debt ceiling would bring stability to the world markets." True or false?
Absolute false. The reality is this would bring chaos to the world market, because all of a sudden you'd have, first of all, investors in Wall Street who would flee by the dozens. We'd see catastrophic losses in equities, which would lead to massive job loss right away. This would also throw into turmoil whether or not the United States, which right now is the stabilizing force in world currency, whether it should continue to be so, and that would drive up interest rates dramatically, making the cost of our debt all the more expensive and depressing demand, because much of what Americans can consume today comes from buying it on credit, and that would totally eliminate their ability to do so to the levels that they have. So this would be a big deal in every stretch of the word, not only for the world, but also at home in your own personal finances.
Second thing is prioritization, a term people have been hearing, that basically you can pick and choose what to pay. This gem coming from Joe Barton, another Republican congressman, who said, well, we have in my household a budget, some bills that have to be paid and some bills that only are getting paid partially. The argument being, hey, all this fear here that come later October that these bills all come due, we got enough in the till, we can pay some and we can basically put some on layaway. True or false?
Reality is that the president doesn't have any authority to decide which bills get paid when. The Treasury is bound to pay dues when they come due. There's no ability on the part of anyone in government to pick who gets paid over someone else. And beyond that, Richard, if you look at the Constitution, the 4th section of the 14th Amendment, it says that the public debt of the United States, its validity ought not be questioned. Therefore, there really is a question as to whether or not Congress has any ability at all not to, by not extending the debt ceiling, whether or not they have a legal authority to prevent the president from paying bills as they come due.
The next one about the actual existence of a debt limit. I'm not making this stuff up. I'm reading these quotes here verbatim because these are the arguments that you hear. And this one from Tom Coburn, Republican senator from Oklahoma, who says, there's no such thing as a debt ceiling in this country because it's never been not increased, and that's why we're $17 trillion in debt. And I would dispel the rumor that's going around that you hear on the news that if you don't raise the debt ceiling, we'll default on our debt. We won't. We'll pay interest, we'll redeem our bonds. Basically, no problem here, keep moving on. Do we have a real thing called a debt limit in this country?
We do, and we are unique in the world in doing so. Most other civilized or not so civilized places realize that when you legally obligate yourselves to pay for things, that the debt that will incur is something that you pay as well. So we're very unique in that we have a two-step process where we have a Congress that can say, let's buy it, and then later on, shall we pay for it or shall we not? That's certainly a very unusual thing. And the fact that Congress has always up until this point paid its bills doesn't obviate the fact that this is a real crisis. If it chooses not to do so this time, it has real consequences.
Finally, the role of what the administration should or shouldn't be saying here. A colleague of Mr. Coburn's in the Senate, Jeff Sessions, said Jack Lew, the Treasury Secretary, should be giving assurances rather than hyping danger. What role is he fulfilling here? Trying to enhance the economic position of the U.S.? I think Lew and the president need to watch the rhetoric. We definitely have the money to pay the debt here. Constitution requires it, as I understand it. Should the government, should the administration more specifically, be scaring folks about what happens at the end of this month if we don't get our house in order?
Well, you know, if the administration doesn't tell people the real consequences, that's just enabling this reckless behavior on the part of congressional Republicans. I understand why Senator Coburn would say it, because the president brings heat and brings sunshine, really, to their very extreme position. But the president is under no obligation, nor should the president try to give Republicans cover for engaging in what is extremely reckless behavior. And, you know, back to this whole idea that we have the money to pay the interest on the debt, that's just one level of what the debt ceiling is all about. It's not just about paying interest, it's about paying all of the other obligations that you've made. Obligations to seniors, obligations to the disabled. All obligations that our government incurs are essentially treated equally when it comes to those bills coming due. Folks who actually hold government securities don't get to be first in line.
So everything from Social Security to food stamps and everything in between, including care for our veterans, those bills also come due. And could you just please dispel the idea that people are looking on the calendar, well, it's not really the 17th, it's the 22nd. The markets don't work that way. If they read here,
that's right.
We go back 2 years ago, Christian, if you could, and tell everybody just what happened with the very threat of it, let alone the idea of going over in 2011.
That's right. Yeah, we saw in 2011, we saw about $2 billion sucked out of the economy in terms of, you know, fears on Wall Street and elsewhere that we were actually going to reach the date. The important thing here is the date. Whether or not that is the actual date that the funds don't line up is largely irrelevant. If we get to the point where we cross the 17th, it will be a signal to the world that the United States no longer has its act together. It'll be a signal that no longer can you look to the United States to be the stabilizing and leading force in the global economy. Trust me, Richard, if you pass that date, catastrophic consequences follow, regardless of whether or not the actual day where the funds are out of balance doesn't occur until a few days later. The Treasury has never been exactly precise about when that minute is going to hit, but we know that once we've crossed the 17th, we've crossed the period at which our politics have failed, and there are going to be global economic consequences as a result.
We haven't even gotten a credit rating and everything else. And Christian, can you just, for anybody who thinks this is a Democrat or Republican or conservative or liberal position, you can't find an economist that got past the third grade that thinks going over the debt limit is a good thing, let alone that aren't using terms like cataclysmic, et cetera, right?
Absolutely. This is not a partisan issue. This is strictly an analysis of what happens when you stop paying your bills and what happens to other people who hold an interest in your debt, what bondholders, what they are likely to do. They're going to demand a higher interest rate because you've all of a sudden you've disrupted the flow of payments to them. Higher interest rates in the bond market means higher interest rates on mortgages, means higher interest rates on credit cards. It throws the whole global financial system into chaos. It means that companies become very concerned about whether or not the value of money is going to be what it once was, and they're going to react very conservatively. Jobs are going to be threatened. This is not just a theoretical exercise. This is common sense. You don't even need an economics degree to understand it.
Christian, Mr. Dorsey, I appreciate a few minutes. Thank you. Hopefully you yourself have spread a little bit of sunshine here into this very confusing or not so confusing subject. Thank you again.
Thank you, Richard.